term of justice to the equity, diversity, and inclusion. So we are not claiming to be DEI experts in any capacity. We're just trying to facilitate a conversation about it. So we want to make sure that, we're being conscious of each other, and we're making sure that we are creating a space that is safe for everyone, and that we are, being kind overall. So before we get started, we're going to do just a little bit of definition work. These are definitions that I've gotten from the University of Washington, just so you know where they came from. So this is a good way for us to kind of understand what exactly we are going to be talking about within this discussion. So some of these terms will probably come up quite often, and we'll be addressing some of them head on more so than others. So you can take a moment to kind of
Nice to meet you.
Yeah, Peter Ruark. Nice to meet you. First day of work today. So yeah.
Hey, Lace. Oh, thank you. It was an accident. She didn't mean it.
Yeah. So just kind of taking a moment to go over these, look through them, and then we will get started on watching a video, and then we will have discussion questions based on the video, and that's kind of how it's going to look. And then around 1:45, we will have a DEI expert from Muskegon Community College come in and give us a little a presentation as well too. So I think I've given everyone a decent amount of time to look through the definitions that we have here. So the first video that we are going to be watching is a video about cultural humility versus cultural competency.
Cultural competency and cultural humility. You may have heard these terms before, possibly in the context of healthcare settings, and not quite understood what they meant. Let's go over what these terms mean and how they apply to everyday life. To be culturally competent is to learn about other cultures, control your biases, and adapt your behaviors and communication style considering the background of people around you. The goal of cultural competency is effective and informed interaction across various cultures. At face value, cultural competency sounds ideal, but it may actually lead us to rely on generalizations about certain groups rather than recognizing the uniqueness of each individual. We also have to ask ourselves, is it realistic or even possible for people to learn everything about other cultures and become completely bias-free? That's where cultural humility comes in. To be culturally humble is to be aware of social power imbalances, respect other people's values and beliefs, and continuously reflect on your own biases. With cultural humility, there's no expectation that you memorize everything there is to know about other groups. Instead, it's a lifelong process of asking yourself how your own biases might impact the way you treat and understand others, alongside work to minimize that impact. Cultural competency is a goal, while cultural humility is a mindset. Let's go over a few ways to practice cultural humility in our daily lives. Recognize that no culture is superior to another. Become comfortable with reflecting on and acknowledging mistakes you've made. Be honest when you're not sure about something. Learn about other cultures with the awareness that you'll never reach perfect understanding. Ask the people in your life if you can have open discussions and hold each other accountable during your learning journey. The great thing about cultural humility is that it acknowledges that no one can get it right all the time. In fact, a key component of cultural humility is being open about what we haven't learned yet. Although it can feel really uncomfortable to admit when we're wrong or don't know something, that vulnerability leaves room for us to continuously learn, grow, and promote equity and inclusion in our communities.
Patricia, you're still muted if you're
Yeah, I
talking.
know. I noticed that. Thank you for letting me know that. So now we're going to go over some reflection questions. So feel free as you read through these different questions, if there's something that really struck you about that video, or, you know, if there's a specific way that you can see how you could implement this or you have. I know for me personally, talking about this within the context of service is I am a service member for Food Corps. I work with building healthy communities at Wayne State University in Detroit. And a lot of what I focus on is helping students or working with students to bring in foods that are culturally relevant to what they usually eat, and making sure that I have cultural humility about what I do and do not know, and that I'm also making sure that I'm doing my own research and not just having people inform me of what they know. So for our first question, just feel free to unmute yourself and contribute to the conversation. So in service, how do you / can you implement cultural humility in your everyday actions as a service member?
So for me, actually, it's kind of funny because like today I actually did this with my students. So I'm a college advisor with the Michigan College Access Network to advise Michigan. So what I do, so what I had done is like, obviously, like I'll educate my seniors about the college going process, how to apply to college, fill out the FAFSA, scholarships, all that good stuff. So now we're at the point of the year where like it's kind of like time to enroll in colleges. And so my school is a predominantly white institution with about 89% of the student body being white. So it's also a very rural area, and I do serve a lot of marginalized students economically. But there are aspects of being privileged that, such as being white, that do lend itself into being privileged. And so what I did actually today, and I did this last year, is I do like a cultural humility session with my students of transitioning from high school to college. And I also talk about college expectations in general. So today I did like a little DEI activity. So I talked about implicit bias, microaggressions. I talked about impact versus intent, cultural reclamation, cultural appropriation versus cultural appreciation. And so I demonstrated in very fun ways. So for example, I did like for the cultural reclamation part, I talked about like, I did a Mean Girls one. So like it was relevant to students sort of, I mean, it's sort of relevant. But basically I talked about how like Damien in that example, like they have that thing that's like to gate a function and how like that can be not used, right? And how it can like manifest badly. If you know Mean Girls, you know. And then there's like other things that I did. So I had this video, and I could probably link it in the chat, about microaggressions. And so I did like a quick video about it. Most of you probably have seen it. It's like the one with the mosquitoes. And then I also did the one where it's like microaggressions against white people, because my school's predominantly white. And I was like, here's what microaggressions look like if we all experience them, and then kind of like illustrated in a very productive way of like how as in college you're going to be facing a lot of different people who don't look like you, that have experienced different walks of life, and who might be more marginalized than you might be even more marginalized than them. So we talked about all of that and how you can just be a better ally and a better person. And I also used the giving tree example of equity, equality, justice, and forget the other one, but yeah, that example to illustrate to students what it means and social justice and how it really does play a lot into our everyday lives. So I think that's what I did. So if you're in MCAN, you know, so yeah, but I'm really interested in hearing what other different AmeriCorps programs implement in their service activities.
Thank you so much, Justin.
Through my food pantry that I serve at, I'm very transparent with my patients that come through in terms of what we have. So I'll say something like all beef hot dogs, or we have sliced ham in the fridge, knowing that not everyone eats pork. And sometimes I will point out specialty items we have, like for my unhoused populations, I will definitely point out cereal bowls that are single serving, and they have milk powder in them. So all they have to do is add water. They don't have to find a hot water source, or they have to find milk. And another thing I do is I keep just plastic and knives and forks in the pantry too, so that even if all they can grab is like an easy open can, they can still consume it with dignity. So those are things I keep in mind at the pantry. I ask people, like, how are you liking these items? So I keep the conversation open. I ask them how their appointments were. I ask them how we can better, which I think is very important.
So thank you, Gabby.
It looks like Amber has her hand up too.
I was just waiting to go, if that's okay. I was just going to add, one thing that we could do is just listen with interest when the students are speaking, and maybe also just hold a curiosity and be open to learning.
Yeah, thank you, Amber. I definitely think a big part of cultural humility is, you know, taking the time to listen. That's a big part of it. Yeah. And if anybody else wants to focus on any of the other questions, so making sure that we keep cultural humility actionable and not complacent, which is why I think there's a big change in terms of like reframing it from competency to humility. I'm not sure if I'm going to say your name right, but Arlie?
Yes, yeah, Arlie.
Awesome.
It's basically Harley without the H. Yeah, so I serve with Cherry Health AmeriCorps, and I serve at the Grand Rapids LGBTQ+ Healthcare Consortium. So a lot of my role is providing education on different topics to both patients and providers. And so kind of with my service in that, part of making sure that cultural humility remains actionable and not complacent is basically checking and trying to make sure that the allyship and advocacy that I'm doing isn't performative, that I am not only holding myself accountable, but holding the people and the organizations that we serve with accountable as well. I think there's a lot of really great work being done in terms of like making healthcare more affirming for all LGBTQ+ patients. But I often see that trans and non-binary patients kind of get left behind in that. So it's a lot of LGB without the T. So with some of my work, I kind of try to bring it back together and make sure that trans and non-binary people are included in the work that we're doing, and making sure that we recognize the different cultural facets of identifying as LGBTQ+, because me as a white person, as a white queer trans person, I'm going to have really different experiences from an indigenous queer person, from a Black queer person. So we, at least in my role, I try really hard to make sure that we have resources that apply not just to the white people in West Michigan, but to all of our queer and trans friends.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Arlie. That's great. So I think now we're going to shift to a different video with Allie. Allie, if you want to introduce yourself in the video beforehand, we can do that as well.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name's Ali Audia. I'm a AmeriCorps member at Huron Pines. I serve in Ann Arbor at Legacy Land Conservancy, and I'm going to talk a bit about equity and how it can pertain to your service experience. And like Patricia said, we're going to kind of stick to the same format of a video and then some open discussion after. So you can go ahead and start with the video, Patricia.
Before we can talk about equity versus equality, I want to first define diversity. At Inclusive Communities, we like to say diversity in its simplest definition means differences. We all have differences, from our glasses to our weight to how much money we have. That is diversity, and no matter how much people say it's hard to find diversity, that's not true. Diversity exists. It's about taking the time to acknowledge its existence and work to ensure action is taken to embrace these differences, not alienate them. Equality is often equated to fairness and sameness, and is based in the misconception that we all have the same needs and the same solution will work for everyone. Equity is based in access and opportunity, with the understanding that we each start with different advantages and disadvantages, and thus have different needs to attain access and opportunity. To understand equity, we have to compare it to equality. Now, I love this equity versus equality graphic, as it's the best explanation of the difference between the two. On the equality side, you see that we've got three individuals, our tall guy, our short girl, and our friend in the wheelchair. And you see that they're all trying to watch this baseball game, but there's this fence. With equality, they've each been given a box to use to be able to see the game. But obviously that's not working, because our tall friend is now super tall and sees very clearly over the fence, while our short girl can just barely see, and she's still kind of on her tiptoes and struggling to see the game, while the person in the wheelchair can't see it all and they can't even get on the box. On the equity side of this picture, you can see that now we've given each individual exactly what they need to be able to see the game. The person in the wheelchair has a ramp, so they can clearly get to the top and see the full game. The shorter girl has two boxes, which is what she needed to comfortably be able to see, and the tall person has no boxes at all because they didn't need the extra assistance in the first place. Equity is a process, which means it is continuous. We can't gain equity by changing just one thing. For example, the equity side of this photo shows our friend in the wheelchair has gained equity at this fence, but the work is not done. True progressive equity is about how can we ensure that he has equitable opportunities at all of the hypothetical and real fences in his life. Equity requires power, resources, and social responsibility to work hand in hand to change the structures and provide opportunities to those who were institutionally left out, marginalized, or oppressed. Equity is hard, but it's essential for us to make change in the lives of those who have been historically depicted as less than. From individuals with disabilities like physical, developmental, and mental, to people living in poverty without access to food or education or healthcare. It's important for us to understand that there is a long history of discrimination, which has created the present day inequities which don't allow these individuals the same access to opportunity than those who don't have those differences. One of the greatest gifts that we give to students that we work with is the opportunity to share their story and to find value in their voice. And this increases awareness and a sense of empowerment. Everyone has their own stuff. Everyone is going through something that challenges their emotional and physical capacity to be great, but there is power in connection. So now here's your challenge. Be brave and seek out those opportunities to have authentic conversations with those that are different than you. Find out what makes them unique and what brings them joy. Then you do the same. Share your story because you have value as well. Now you've built community. And with community, we have power. We is always stronger than me.
Okay, I hope everybody enjoyed the video and it allowed for some reflection. Just to go over some of the main points that she mentioned, there is a fundamental difference between equity and equality. While equality generally refers to equal opportunity and the same levels of support for all individuals, equity takes that further step and offers varying levels of support that's dependent upon achieving fairness in outcomes. Equity can't be achieved through making a single change. It's a continuous process. And progressive equity takes into account more than a single situation. It takes into account, hypothetical situations in addition to real world scenarios. And for, each of us personally, what's the first step that we can do to address equity imbalances in our current service? To start, provide spaces just like this that allows for listening and action, where people can share their stories and needs, and we can promote connection and community to acknowledge that everybody comes from a different background and has different needs. So you can go to the next slide, Patricia. and we can go over some questions. So do you feel that your AmeriCorps program is equally accessible to individuals of different backgrounds? And are there resources you wish were available to you through your AmeriCorps program that you currently don't have access to? So I know for me personally, I'm fortunate enough to live close enough to my host site that I can live with my parents and commute, but I don't think that I'd be able to afford housing in Ann Arbor otherwise, and I wouldn't have been able to pursue my service term for a second year, just based on the stipend that Huron Pines offers. So just situations like that where you think that, you know, service is not necessarily as accessible to everybody if they don't have the background, you know, the privilege that I do of living with my parents and getting to drive from my parents' house? Or is there resources that you don't currently have access to through your AmeriCorps program? So, you know, healthcare programs, emergency services, childcare programs, anything like that?
I have to say personally, for me, through my service, and being partnered with MCAN, they provide us with a lot of resources. That's one of the first things that was on, I believe, the application process was, do you have kids? And they do cover health care, and we have health, vision, and dental, as well as childcare if needed. So I love that. And then just looking at my group of coaches, we vary in race, gender, sexual preference, and age. We was just laughing because Friday we were in PD, and someone was like, "We're close to 60. I don't know if that counts for us." And they was like, "Was we're over 60, and we just had one that just freshly turned 23." So it's like we got the whole gambit there. So I just shout out to MCAN and our AmeriCorps because I love the people that I serve with and how diverse my team is. I see you, Tyrone. Thank you for coming.
That's awesome, Vance. Go ahead, Amber.
One thing that I wanted to mention, that it was a personal experience that I had, and it is kind of an expansive way to look at it. And if it's me, it could be other people as well. But when it comes to like the childcare, like Van said, that is an opportunity that is out there for people who are in AmeriCorps to have assistance with. But the position that I came in with was that I did like the childcare in the home for my children during the summer, because prior to taking this position, I didn't work outside of the home. And together as a family, you know, we depended primarily on my husband's income. So then when it came time for me to go through the process of doing like the childcare piece to learn more about what those benefits would look like, I wouldn't be eligible because like his income is higher. So that absolutely is, I know it might sound weird, but it put me definitely individually in a tough position, because then like for me to put my 2 children in childcare full time for the summer is going to be more than the living stipend. So I guess it just for me was really brain stretchy in a way, because had I not taken the opportunity to serve, I wouldn't have needed the assistance. And then now being in this, so I'm definitely having a lot of one-on-ones with like my partnership manager, and we're just trying to find solutions. But just to think all the way around it, sometimes I think we do look at equity in one way, and just to think there could also be other, people that are trying to become part of the program, and it may not be accessible to them based on some of those sort of factors.
Thanks for sharing, Amber. And I think that, a lot of the time you're like, I'm a completely unique individual in this, but often when you have that problem, another person absolutely has that problem as well. So you taking the initiative to find a solution, somebody else is absolutely gonna benefit from that in the future. Thank you for doing it. Go ahead, Heather.
Hello there. So I am an MCAN coach also, and I'm serving in Oscoda, Michigan through Alpena Community College. And this is actually the 3rd time I've been part of AmeriCorps. The first time I was a City Year Corps member, and the second time I was a CDM Downtown and Rural Development Vista. I was an AmeriCorps Vista, and this time I'm here with MCAN. So I also, all 3 times I had a vastly different living experience. The first time I was single and young, I had no children. I was able to bunk up with my aunt, and I also would not have been able to afford housing in the city that I lived in. The second time I was a young single mother who had a 4-year-old son who, Amber, also struggled with the childcare piece, because I went in thinking, oh my gosh, this is like the answer to all of my worries. And it was not simple for me to get childcare, and I ended up not qualifying. So, and then this time I'm married, I have 2 children, and my husband also is our main income source. I don't really need the income for this. I have plans for it, but I'm blessed, very blessed. I recognize that totally. So it's not that the resources aren't there, to cut my story short. It's that the access to these resources is not as easy as it's presented, and they're often not quite exactly what you think they are either. So like going in, when they recruit you, you're like, you really do think like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. But there are still broken pieces in the system to access for us. And if I'm experiencing this, then I also agree that more people are. I am a good self-advocate and I'm not afraid to speak up, but I feel like there must be people who are getting lost in the cracks too. So I think that it's maybe not that it's not the resources don't exist or they aren't there. It's the path that we need to work on now.
Thanks for sharing, Heather. Good stuff. Y'all see, I love my coaches. I tell y'all all the time. I serve with some great people. Thank y'all so much for sharing.
If nobody else would like to share, I can pass it over to Mary.
Oh, well, I'll go ahead.
No, go ahead, Jessica.
Oh, okay. Well, I feel like the AmeriCorps program is equally accessible to individuals. You just probably have to, look more into the programs, or just contact the site managers, and they're very accommodating with everything, or speak directly to AmeriCorps too. Because like I tried to follow up like on our loan interest, everything was completed. Anytime you need, any information, I would just advise, everyone to just plan early. If you got to send in documentation, I use childcare through AmeriCorps too, and they pay for the childcare at the college, which was a little bit pricey, but they covered it, so they weren't really too worried about the price. Just make sure we just turn in our paperwork. Yeah, but I feel great about AmeriCorps. This is my 4th year. So this will be my last year with state and national. But since I think was it 93 or 96, I've been with AmeriCorps, and yeah, it's been great. It's been a great experience.
Well, if I may add, this is Ty here. I have to say that resource-wise, that my immediate supervisor and supervisor have been most helpful to me during my current personal situation. And most jobs, I guess I would have to either stop working or do something totally different. So from the resource standpoint, I say the support that comes from those who use the term above you or supervise you have been most helpful, and which instill in me the willingness to be more progressive in regards to AmeriCorps and MCAN. And so that's how I see things as they are right now. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing, everybody. Would anybody else like to say something? Don't want to cut anybody off or make them feel like they can't be heard. All right, I'm going to pass it over to Mary then, so that she has enough time.
All right, thank you, Allie, and thank you everyone for being here. My name is Mary Zorin. My pronouns are she, her, and I am currently serving with City Year Detroit. This is my 2nd year with City Year, and I'm serving at Osborne High School. And today I'm going to follow along this train. I think everything's like built in. All these discussions really kind of connect in their own little web. So something that I'm going to focus on for our discussion is belonging. That's kind of like a little divot, like that's a part of inclusion. So first we're gonna do the video, and Patricia, you can stop it at 2:40. So for this video, this is Karen Taylor. She's been in like diversity work for a long time. So something for you all to reflect on while listening to her story is what stood out to you about what Karen shares, and also how did the story make you feel? And with that, Patricia, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. I have an important question. Has anyone out there ever felt like they didn't belong? Almost everybody's raising their hands. I have another important question. Has anyone out there ever made someone else feel like they didn't belong? I certainly have, and I'll start there. I was at a sales conference once. It was a sales conference, about 300 people in the room. I'm one of about 10 women. I'm one of 2 African Americans, and I'm the only African American woman in the room. And the topic of conversation that day just happened to be diversity. So I remembered sitting in the front row, and I remembered steam coming out of my ears because I'm sitting there looking at this typical white male executive talk about diversity. And I sat there thinking, you are gonna talk to me about diversity? No, that's not gonna happen. So as I was sitting there, I couldn't receive this person's message. I mean, as a matter of fact, today, I have no idea what that conversation was even about. But I do know that I couldn't receive his message, and I'm a really curious person. So during a break, I walked up and I said, Mike, you know what? I really can't receive your message. And he said, why not? And I said, because of what you look like. And he said, I'm gay. And it was the first time that unconscious bias really hit me upside the head. But I really didn't understand the impact of that story until I got home later that evening. I was sitting down, I was about to take my first bite of food, and I burst into tears. Because what I realized is what I had done to Mike, people had been doing to me my entire life. They had been judging me simply by what I looked like. And I, in turn, had started to do that to other people. It was that day that I said I would never make another person feel undervalued for who they were, simply because of what they look like. And I share that story with you because it's what drives me around this topic of belonging. And it's actually what spurred me to start to think about the importance of why the notion of belonging really mattered to people. So I want to talk a little bit.
Perfect. Thank you, Patricia. And you can go ahead now to the next slide. So what I'm about to share now is kind of like a condensed version of what Karen shared in her TED Talk, and it will kind of help guide our discussion about what belonging means to you. So some things that she has garnered and like realized throughout her experience is that certain conditions, like basic conditions, have to exist in order to feel like you belong. And there's 5 tenets of that, and that's what we're going to discuss in the next coming slide. Another thing that she realized is that belonging, it's so hard to find a definition for it because it means something different to everybody. So you have to really own what belonging means to you and articulate what that means to other people so they can support you in feeling like you belong. And Patricia, you can go to the next slide. So these are the 5 tenets of belonging that Karen shared that she believes are the 5 conditions that you need in order to feel like you belong. So you have psychological safety, which is trust, or your like safety, your ability to like share feelings with people, empathy, acceptance, being able to be your best authentic self, connection, wanting to be a part of something, and also being embraced and getting value and respect. So part of our discussion is discussing what you all feel like you need to feel like you belong. Patricia, you can go to the next slide. So I wrote those 5 tenets of belonging under the first bullet point. So what do you need to feel like you belong and why? I also wanted to pose the question as to what aspects of being an AmeriCorps member at your program make you feel like you belong or don't make you feel like you belong. And then also, what can you do within your program to highlight or advocate for what others and you need to feel like you belong?
I think for me, I'm going to go for the second bullet point. What aspects of being an AmeriCorps member at your program make you feel like you belong? I'm just going to take that first portion. What makes me feel like I belong is because it seems like they were looking for someone like me. It made a big difference in me when I was reading the job description, and the students that we were aiming to help were low income, first generation, and what really stood out was students of color, because they didn't have to put the students of color. They could have just stuck with the low income first generation, but the students of color, that just made a big difference to me, because like, oh, okay, you see us, like, because a lot of times it's like, okay, yeah, let's pay attention to them, but we don't really pay attention to them. We just got to put it out there. But no, they actually went the extra step, and I can feel I feel the love. I don't know. It's just a good feeling being a part of a team that accepts you and also looks like you in places, from the higher ups to the ones that are just like me and the coaches. So I love how, like I say again, how diverse our team is, and just going through, it's like the melting. I always go back to the melting pot. That's how I was raised. I grew up with the melting pot. And going through, even just looking at our board and all the people that work with us, it's like the melting pot. And so I love that.
Thank you for sharing, Vance. I'm glad that you have had such a positive experience that you can share with us.
Thank you.
Amber, go ahead.
I'm so sorry, I didn't raise my hand on.
Oh, it's okay. I saw you physically
that's
raise.
okay. So I would actually say Vance is one of the reasons that I feel like I belong, because of just, I would say, his leadership in hospitality. One of the very first group things we had done, like an in-person development. I was still like going through my training, but yeah, like his spirit is so warm and engaging and kind and inclusive, and like, hey, like, hey, tell me a little bit about you. And immediately it set a foundation of feeling like people care. And yeah, that this would be a space that I could feel free to be me and that I would belong in.
Thank you so much. Y'all know I tell them all the time, the people that's not my coaches, I'm like, I love my coaches. Y'all make my day. Y'all make this past year, even the new ones, I love y'all. Gorgeous, I love you.
Thank you for sharing, Amber. And it's great to see, like, this is all like showing the belonging in action, right? You know, your experience in Vance, that's a part of what you need to feel like you belong. And it's great to see that you have that. And thank you, Vance, for being you. Would anyone else like to share? It looks like Ty shared in the chat, since they've been living in Lansing in the MCAN organization, they feel like they've received all 5 tenets from the start. That's awesome.
Love it, Ty. Thank you for sharing.
Nick, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, so if you don't mind, thank you. When I think about the kind of 5 basic tenets, if you will, one that is very important to me, at least, is the kind of, I think it might be embraced. And this is in the sense that I feel like I have a space to be heard, and that I have a space to contribute. and that I'm allowed to be a part of that, and that larger interaction, no matter how it looks. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing it.
Well, this is Jessica. I just wanted to share. I think that's great. You know, the embraced. And the second question about what make me feel like I belong. Well, here, you know, it's wonderful. We feel like, you know, just a supportive team as one, you know, trying to accomplish our goals. I've never heard in a conversation or I make sure to exclude certain labels from my vocabulary, you know, to have genuine conversations with individuals. And just as the conversation today, when I heard like white supremacy or queer, I actually had to look it up on the internet to see what that means. I don't know, and the people that I work with in my group I serve with, they just don't reference like the number of diversities here at my college. We just, you know, just look at each other as one, as a team. You know, they don't divide the diversities or, yeah. So I just kind of just make sure I exclude certain things from my vocabulary. And yeah, it's great here. I love it here.
Thank you for sharing, Jessica. And it sounds like you already have done like some of that like cultural humility work about like seeing how you can like better support those around you. So thank you for sharing that with us. And if there's no one else, I think I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Vance. Thank you all so much.
Thank you all so much for being here. We have a guest speaker he's a DEI expert. He's our Chief Diversity Officer here at Muskegon Community College. And he's gonna give us a nice overview and some good info on DEI. So thank you, and I'd like you all to welcome Ken James.
Well, hello, everybody. And it's a pleasure to be here. It looks like I logged on just in time. We were passing out some kudos. So Vance, there's more than one organization that appreciates you, because MCC is one of them as well. So
thank you.
I logged on just in time, and it's interesting. I did see the questions that you had up, and talking about belonging. So that kind of latches to what I will discuss with you today. So Van had reached out to me and asked would I talk to AmeriCorps, and we made it happen. So here I am, and I'd like to spend a few minutes with you talking about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. But we'll get in, and I have about 6 hours of content for you. So everybody will be getting some Uber Eats delivered around 5 o'clock, and we'll go. But in all seriousness, I'll dive in, and we'll ask some questions. So I'm going to share my screen here and get ready to dive forward. So hopefully everyone can see this PowerPoint. And before I even dive in, the slides that I'm using here today, I will provide to you through Van via email. So you'll get a copy of these, but feel free to take notes, and we're gonna have an opportunity to ask questions. But I'm just gonna give you an overview of diversity, equity, inclusion, and how we advance it at Muskegon Community College. And hopefully that's something you can build into your daily jobs, things that you do. But let's dive in. So here's what you can expect over our time here today. I'm gonna do a quick warm up, make sure nobody's experiencing Zoom fatigue. I'm going to do some introduction of myself so you kind of know who's before you. I'll give an overview of the Office of DEI and answer some of those frequently asked DEI questions. There'll be an opportunity to ask questions, and then we can talk about next steps, if any. So here is my promise to you. I do believe in interaction and humor, but I'm going to give you some things that hopefully are thought-provoking and relevant. And if I've done my job here today, you'll leave here with some terms, some ideologies, some frameworks that will keep you thinking. So we're gonna go ahead and start here. So you might see a little bit of a black square pop up on the screen, but that's just, I need to see a few faces. So I've done that. So what I'd like you to do now, and this is to kind of get us through the Zoom fatigue, I need you to go to the chat feature and I need you to find the drop down where it says everyone. I want you to do a chat to everyone. That's there. So I think everybody found that. And then what I want you to do is I want you to drop in your favorite season of the year. Are you a spring, summer, fall, or winter person? But I want everybody to share what their favorite season is. Okay, yep, pop it in here. Summer took an early lead, but fall is winning now. Yeah, okay. Okay. And I forgot to mention, if you don't like a season or if you have more than one, you can put in two, or you don't have to, you say it doesn't matter, that's fine. All right, spring, fingers in the dirt. I like the explanation of why you like your season. Outstanding. So thank you for sharing your favorite season with me. Now, what I want you to do now is, for those that are familiar, you should be able to do this. Go back to the chat feature, and I want you to find me individually. I should be in there somewhere. And if you're having a problem finding me, let me know, but find me individually. And I want everyone to send me a personal chat or a private chat. And I want you to share with me your nickname growing up. And if you didn't have a nickname, just say I didn't have a nickname, but private chat to me your nickname growing up. All right. Outstanding. Some of these require explanation. Okay. All right. Okay, I won't reveal it, but it's one of your, yeah, it sounds like one of my favorite cereals growing up was your nickname. Okay. Outstanding, outstanding. So thank you for doing that and just playing along. I just wanted to take a second for us to get engaged a little bit, and maybe we'll be doing Zoom fatigue, but here is my promise to you. I told you this will be interactive and humorous. I'm going to give you some things to keep you thinking. But as we go through this, feel free to drop a question in the chat, and then I'll get to a question and answers portion. But if there's a question you weren't comfortable asking in front of the whole group, or you didn't want to unmute yourself and ask it, if you send me a question privately, I will address that anonymously. So that is my promise to you. If you send me a question privately, I will address that anonymously. And then the other side part of that is I just wanted to get us engaged real quick because we might be tired because we've been on this Zoom meeting for a number of times. So thank you for indulging me there. So let me jump in and continue. As I mentioned, you're going to get these slides. You'll get my full bio when you get the slides. So when you get home tonight, if you have any problem falling asleep, start reading my bio. It'll put you right to sleep. But I just want to give you an overview of who's talking to you here today. So right now on the screen, there are some bullet points that don't make a lot of sense, but they will in just a moment. Top line there, I am originally from San Diego, California. I call San Diego home. I am the youngest of 4 children, and we were Navy brats. My dad was a career Navy man. And I have an older sister that was born in Pensacola, Florida. I have a brother that was born in Memphis, Tennessee. A lot of people are very curious to find out that there's a Naval Air Station in Memphis, Tennessee. My dad was stationed there when my brother was born. I have a sister born in Subic Bay, Philippines, and I was born in San Diego, California. My dad retired after 24 years in the Navy when I was in the 2nd grade. And thank you for your service. So when my dad retired, I was in the 2nd grade. He then went to work for San Diego Gas and Electric. So the family stayed in San Diego. So I consider San Diego to be my home birth through when I left to go to college. I did my undergraduate at Kentucky State University. I left California on a football scholarship to Kentucky State University. That is a historically Black university in Frankfort, Kentucky. And I played football there. It's a Division II school. And I graduated, and I'll date myself, in 1994. I graduated, and I was accepted that same year into grad school at Grand Valley State University. So I moved to Michigan on a 2-year plan in 1994 to get my master's from Grand Valley, which I did. If there's any Lakers on the call, go Lakers. But I thought I'd only be here 2 years because I really wasn't a cold weather person. And 30 years later, I'm still here. Reason being is that second bullet point, I am outnumbered at home. I am married with 3 daughters. Their ages are 15, 16, and 18. I have a sophomore, junior, and senior in the same high school. My oldest graduates this year. So that's the chapter of life that I'm in, transitioning my first out of high school, driver's training, trying to be in 2 places at once because one has a band competition, the other one has a sports competition. So that's the story of life that we're doing. But in the 28 years professionally that I've been here in West Michigan, I've held a number of jobs in the human resource field. I've done training and development. affirmative action, equal opportunity, recruitment and talent acquisition, but every job that I've had the lens of DEI. So when you hear me say DEI, that is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I've worked in municipal government, healthcare, higher ed, corporate retail, went back to healthcare. Most recently, I was a nonprofit. I was the director of inclusion for the Grand Rapids Chamber of Commerce. And now I'm back in higher ed. I'm serving as the first chief diversity officer at Muskegon Community College. And I also bring with me my ECDC, which is my executive certification in diversity coaching. So my experiences, my training has prepared me to lead diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. And I'm honored to be doing this on behalf of MCC. To get us going here today, there is a quote that I like from Albert Einstein that says, "We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them." So he was a pretty smart guy, and this is a quote that I like. So it kind of sets the tone for what I want to discuss with you today. So before we go forward, I want to take just a moment to define diversity, equity, inclusion. What is DEI? And oftentimes we hear these words. They are very important, in my opinion, but they are not synonymous. They are not the same, but they do overlap and interact with one another. And how we define diversity, equity, inclusion at MCC is this: diversity, the differences that make each of us unique. Now, when we hear diversity, it's human nature for us to gravitate to things we can see, age, race, gender, but diversity is much more than that. Diversity of thought, native language, country of origin, inner city, urban, rural, Catholic, Protestant, atheist. Those are all examples of diversity, and it goes on and on. But to me, if we're intentional about recognizing diversity, we can leverage those to be assets if we can manage those diversity pieces. But it takes a little bit of intentionality. But also, I want to caution you, you can look at a room and it might look the same, but it still can be diverse because there's so many aspects of diversity that we can't see. The next one is equity, where equity seeks to ensure fair treatment, equality of opportunity, fairness and access to information, and resources for all. That last sentence is something that I added, that I believe that this is possible in an environment built on respect and dignity. But equity is that in fair treatment and equality of opportunity and fairness and access to information and resources for all. So that's what equity is. And I always bookmark right here, and I tell people that I'm talking to, you don't want to confuse equity with equal. Equal means being the same. So I know we're on a virtual meeting right now, but if we were all in one room and you saw me, I'm a former football player, I'm kind of a big guy. So if we were all in the same room, and if I was being equal, I would give everybody a size 14 pair of shoes, because that's what I wear. I'm being equal. I wear 14, I'm giving everybody 14, that's equal. But if I was passing out shoes, if I was being equitable or applying a lens of equity, who needs a heel, who needs a flat, who needs a tennis shoe, what size do you need? You know, those things. So that's just an example of how equity shows up and how it plays out. And last but not least is inclusion, where you build a culture of belonging by actively inviting the contribution and participation of all people. So I was very pleased when I joined your call a few minutes ago, and the question about, do you feel like you belong at AmeriCorps? And that in itself is the journey of diversity, equity, inclusion. How do we get to where people feel like they belong? So I'm going to use Vance as an example. Vance, you don't have to unmute yourself. You get to stay there. But Vance is my coworker. I see Vance on MCC's campus. We've known each other for going on a couple of years. And I know if I went to Vance's house right now, he would make me feel welcome. Ken, have a seat. Ken, can I give you something to drink? But if I felt like I belonged at Vance's house, I could kick off those size 14 shoes and put my feet up on the couch. I could go in the fridge and fix my own drink or see what leftovers he had in there for me. You know, that's a sense of belonging. So I liken that to my parents, who are now twice retired. They live in South Georgia. I visit them when I can. But when I get to their house, even though it's not the house I grew up in, I know I belong. It doesn't matter if I sleep on the couch or sleep in the guest room. It doesn't matter what's in the fridge, I'm welcome to it. If they're not using their car, I really don't have to ask. I can just take the keys and use it because I know I belong there. And that is the journey of diversity, equity, inclusion. Think about our workplaces. Do we feel like we belong? And the intentionality about that is so powerful because that means something for each of us. So we have to meet people where they're at. That means you have to not check any part of yourself at the door. No code switching. You can bring your authentic self to work. You can contribute. You're heard. But I said all that. It's easier said than done. But that is the journey of DEI, is to get to a feeling that we all belong. So here's another one of my mantras that I want to create with you. And you know each other. I'm the outsider coming in, but when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, I believe that we have to create safe spaces. But I also tell folks to have the conversations we need to have. Safe and comfort are not synonymous. We can create a safe space and still have an uncomfortable conversation. So I like to tell folks that I work with around DEI, this is a safe space. We have to talk about what we have to talk about, but I say, let's have a brave space. So we have to bring these things up. Let's talk about these things. So let's create that brave space. It can still be safe. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be comfortable. So as I came to MCC, there was some work that predated me, and it was around cultural awareness. So these are things that you might think about how it shows up in your organization. But before I got to MCC, there have been work around cultural awareness. There have been work around workforce and organizational strategy. There have been work around cultural competency and community outreach. And I took these 4 pillars that were in place, and I did my own needs assessment over the last year and a half. And I arrived at 4 stakeholder groups that I'm going to apply the lens of DEI on behalf of MCC. So first and foremost are our students. No matter how students get through our door, they are welcome here, and we want them to finish. And it doesn't matter if this is a traditional student that just graduated high school, they're coming to college for the first time, a returning student, a transfer student, a returning citizen, someone that's getting out of the services, veterans, however they get here, we want them to succeed. And whatever their vision is of success, associates and transfer, just take some classes. I just want to get a certificate, or I just want to get some training. Whatever that is, we want to make sure they're successful. And then the second bullet point there is faculty and staff. Are we a culturally competent institution? So I'm now starting to roll out some things about helping our staff to become culturally competent, because the biggest impact to retention is a faculty and staff that make students feel like they belong at MCC. And then the bottom 2 points is community and business, and I put asterisks there. So the unique part about my role is I do some community outreach. Some of you might be familiar here in Muskegon County that we do, MCC helps lead a Reverend Martin Luther King Unity Day breakfast. We just had one this past January, and we had 800 people attend, so it was the biggest ever. But in addition to that breakfast that we're gonna have every year, we're going to start doing some community-wide book studies, a lecture series, things. So when the community thinks about DEI and who I can partner with, we want people to think of Muskegon Community College. And then fourth, but not least, is the business community. We provide diversity, equity, inclusion training to the business community. So right now we have trainings around implicit bias, mitigating microaggressions, the benefit of an inclusive workforce, just to name a few, and we're building more that will be coming out this year. So organizations can engage with us to train their faculty, staff, students, board members, any community members, volunteers. These are things that we can do training around these lenses of DEI, and we make it available and accessible. So this is something, there is a fee associated with it, but it's very, what we feel, easy to access us because we're right here in the community, and it'll be a lot less if someone engaged with a coach or a consultant outside of the community. So that's a little bit about the department that I lead. We are a team of 2. Myself as the Chief Diversity Officer, and I have 1 director, and his name is Dr. Van McMullen. And the links, when you get them, they are very live links. So you can just click right on there, learn more about me and Dr. McMullen, see what we're up to, and answer some questions around diversity, equity, inclusion. But here's some things that I wanted to kind of share with you as we talk about DEI, just to give you a few takeaways. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a moment. Feel free to turn on your camera if you would like. I'm going to ask a question. And when I ask this question, there is no wrong answer. There is no wrong answer. What do biscuits, rice, and tortillas have in common? And if you have an answer, just yell it out. They're all white, okay? They're food, yep, food, all right.
They contain flour.
They contain flour, okay? And those are all correct. But in the context of us thinking about this, all grains, in the context of me thinking about this, depending of the region of the country you're from, they're breakfast staples. And I shared this with you on my journey. So here I am, I identify as a Black man, And when I went to college, I was playing football with people that looked like me. We were all Black men. And I remember the first time we went to our breakfast table, I was shocked because on the buffet, there was biscuits, rice, and tortillas. Now, for me, in my lens, and there's nothing wrong with that, don't get me, but I just wasn't used to it. So for me, in my lens, if I ate bread at breakfast, it was usually toast. Every now and again, we have biscuits, but rice was a dinner thing. If we ate rice, it was at dinner. And tortillas was something that I had only identified with the Mexican culture where I grew up at. But again, here I am at college, and there were students, we were all from all over the country, but the majority of folks were from Tennessee, Kentucky, and Alabama, regionally there. And I was shocked, but that's what they ate because it was in abundance. That's what they ate. So one thing I wanted to talk to you about when we talk about applying the lens of DEI is having a mindset shift. So we can look at the same thing, have a different interpretation. So something as simple as, hey, I'm fixing breakfast for you. If the expectation was rice and you got eggs, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just different. But we all look the same. But I also had to train my mind, when you see something different, it's not odd. It's not beneath you. It's not nasty. It's just that it's different. I wouldn't do it that way, but there's nothing wrong with that. So sometimes with our lens of DEI, if somebody does something different than you, or do something you don't approve of, or do something that's not part of your mantra, doesn't make it wrong. It just makes it different, and that's okay. That's the thing. We have to be intentional around that. And so let me kind of bring it home a little bit further. So the lens of DEI, why am I treating an hourly employee different than a salaried employee? Why am I treating a third shift employee different than a first employee? Or why am I treating a constituent? I use this example. I permission. My wife works in K-12 education. And one of the things she used to hear all the time at the school, at the time she was leading an elementary school, principal in elementary, she would just say, oh, if parents would just come up here more often, if parents would just come up here more often. But then the staff would go further. Do you know, a parent would come up there and maybe they had their pajamas on, or they had a scarf on, and or they caught a cab, just anything that was different than the staff was anticipating, they would kind of hold that against them instead of just saying, forget that, they're here. We wanted them to be here, they're here. We don't know what they had to go through to get here. Let's have to do it. So that's just an example, but it takes intentionality to work through those things. And so we have to have that mindset shift. Another example that I'll use is just a little bit more about when we have to be an ally to one another around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So one of the tips that I always share people, that if it's not your experience, it doesn't mean it didn't happen to that person. So just where you're talking about lens of DEI. So again, I have permission to tell these stories. So again, my wife works in K-12 education, and she has been a school principal for a number of years. In this particular example, she was a principal at a predominantly white elementary school. And in that district, she was the only person of color, not the only woman, but the only person of color that was a principal at all the schools. But this used to happen to her. People would come into the building seeking to see the principal, vendor, parent, grandparent, whoever, would come into the building and say, hey, I need to see the principal. And then someone on her team would get her. She'd come out from the back and they'd say, oh, no, I need to see the person in charge. I need to see the principal. And they would question if she was principal. And I'm married to a Black woman, if I didn't say that. So she was a Black woman. And people would question if she was indeed the principal. And this happened to her so much that she actually got desensitized to it, But this particular day, someone came in, needed to see the principal, and they questioned if she was the principal, and she went with that. But this happened to be the same day that there was a principal meeting with the superintendent. So at the end of the day, all of the principals were meeting in one school with the superintendent. And they were having that meeting before the meeting. And everybody's around the coffee pot, getting a donut or a cookie or whatever. And she's just kind of venting to her peers. Hey, this happened to me today, happens a lot. And they were like, hey, and these happen to be white males. And they're like, that never happens to me. Are you sure it happens to you? They were questioning, did that happen to her? And the reason this story sticks out to me, when we got home, we were just kind of debriefing our day, not getting validation from her peers actually bothered her more than the infraction itself. And so one of the tips that I tell people, if someone is sharing their story with you, it might not be your experience, but it doesn't mean it didn't happen. And at a minimum, we can always listen and show empathy. We can always listen and show empathy because there's something to be learned from those things. So that's just, a little bit of DEI 101, if you will. I've defined it for you. You'll get these questions. And I wanted to give an opportunity for you to ask me questions, but I have a few more slides that I want to share with you. Then we'll get to the Q&A. Okay, I think everybody can see that there. So those are the links that I had shared with you. This is a quote that I leave, and it's really powerful for me, but it reads, "Diversity is a fact. Inclusion is a behavior, but belonging is the emotional outcome that people want in their organization." So again, when I saw that question, what was on the screen, when I happened to jump in and you're asking questions about what does it take for your teammates to belong, I think there's some validity to our conversation here. I'm going to give you a time to ask questions. So while you're thinking of that, but I wanted to share this last slide with you before I minimize my screen, is you're going to have my contact information. So again, we're going to chat now, but if you think of something later, if I can be of service to you later, feel free to reach out to me. That's my direct line. Best mode to reach me is my email address, because wherever I'm at, whatever device I'm on, my emails do pop in. But that's just a little bit about DEI, what I'm doing at MCC, and some takeaways that I wanted to share with you. But what questions can I answer for you? And while we're thinking of that, feel free to use the chat if you're comfortable doing that. Or like I said, anything that comes to me privately, I'll address anonymously. There's an old facilitator saying that it takes 15 seconds for someone to think of their question and then get the courage to ask it. So I'm okay with a 15-second pause, just so you know that. You're welcome. I saw that in the chat.
Go ahead, Amber. Just unmute and go for it.
Okay, thank you, Vance. And my question, it was in regards to the breakfast and the speaking series. And do you find that hosting that event and breaking out into more programming is something that benefits? I guess my question would be, I mean, I know it would probably largely benefit your community, but your school, your staff, your administration, and your students specifically?
Yeah,
in
so
ways.
Yeah. So you're referring to our Martin Luther King breakfast? Yeah, huge community event. And that's something we're gonna do for the community. And if I heard your question correctly, the benefit of coming to MCC is we're gonna have programming that you'll have access to. So we have some for faculty and staff. I'm building some for students that I'll be rolling that out this fall of this year. So that's a community-wide program, but being a JCOC has its privileges. And so if anybody's there, we have some opportunities to train faculty and staff around some things and to train students on things. But in addition to that, like I shared, if you wanted to engage with my department to bring implicit bias training or mitigating microaggression training or the benefit of inclusive workforce training inside your organization, that's something we can deliver as well. All right, thank you, Amber. Nick.
Hey, thanks for being here today.
My pleasure.
I'm just curious, how do you, or do you have any ideas on how you even start the conversation with people, how to kind of get them, different organizations, into thinking that they might even want to do this kind of training, especially ones that are probably like predominantly of a certain race, gender, etc., who may not see a need for this. Is there any kind of advice you might have for kind of opening up that conversation and getting that ball rolling?
I'll give you my opinion. Another DEI practitioner might share. So one, I never think it's too late to get started. So sometimes organizations, oh, we didn't start it back. So it's never too late to get started. That's number one. But number two, you have to know the pace of your organization. So before I come into any organization, whether it's the first step or an organization that's been on a journey, I'll try to figure out what's there and navigate what needs to be done. So there has to be some situational awareness, because if you have something bad happen early or contentious, that might derail the whole process. And so I do my best to do to find that out. The second thing about that is you have to know the pace of your organization. So there are a lot of lenses to diversity out there, and not every organization is ready to lead with that. Could be race, could be LGBTQ+, could be socioeconomic, a number of things. Could be, conservative, liberal, whatever's going on. But I want to give you this analogy. Never too late to get started. I always want to start it. But if you've ever seen a greyhound dog race on TV or been to one, there's this mechanical rabbit that takes off and then the dogs start chasing it, that analogy. Well, research has proven for those greyhounds, if the rabbit gets too far ahead, they'll stop chasing it because it's unattainable. And so the same can happen in DEI work. It needs to be done, but if you get out too far ahead, no one's going to follow you. So you have to know the pace of your organization. Then the last analogy that I'll give you, at least on this, is if you picture in your mind Niagara Falls. Just picture Niagara Falls in your mind. You have this steady, cascading waterfall that never ceases, okay? But I also want you to picture in your mind Old Faithful, Yellowstone National Park. Everybody gathers around, the ground rumbles, and the geyser erupts, but then it goes away. Since 2020, people that do work like me have been approached to say, hey, let's have conversations about race. You know, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, to name a few. And I tell organizations that if we're going to have this conversation, it needs to be a Niagara Falls approach, meaning we need to start it, it needs to be steady, and it needs to be constant. And if something rises to the surface that's uncomfortable, think about the brave space that I talked about. I would challenge you, it was there the whole time, festering. Now it's at the surface, we have to navigate it. I'm very hesitant to work with organizations, and I'm very hesitant to tell people to start the work if you're going to say, Ken's going to come in one afternoon, talk about some stuff, you know, Old Faithful, and we're gonna hit it, and then we check the box, we're done. Very hesitant to do that because that could do more harm than good. So thank you for your question, Nick.
Yeah, thank you. That was so great.
All right, and I got a couple things in the private chat here. I'm just catching up. You just indulge me for about 10 seconds here. And the question that I'm referring to, so, you know, how will we respond to messaging around people that come to work? I'm assuming this is a work example around messaging where people are coming to work, they had different experiences, and people may have been stereotyped or they're code switching. You can look at this word, but code switching is, you know, where you have to minimize some part of you to make others feel comfortable. So when you get to a workspace, you want to work to that feeling where people feel like they belong, but people have come in and had mixed messages, or they've been stereotyped, and you might have to navigate some real complexities there. And my answer to, if somebody is in the work dealing with that is to find an ally at work, someone you can talk to. But then those of you that are in the positions to look at culture and how people are feeling and morale is at work, you might want to address some of those issues. You know, just to say, hey, and when I say allyship, if I could give you another, you know, my definition, for me, allyship shows up in 3 ways. So one, as I advance diversity, equity, inclusion work, I get tired. And it's no good to anyone if I can't finish the race, so to speak. So I have an ally at work, and I'll use Vance again as the example. Vance, take the baton. I'm taking a 3-day weekend. I'm going to hit reset. I'll come back Monday and I'll pick that baton back up, because I'm no good to anyone if I'm not emotionally whole. The other way allyship shows up, and this could be internal or external, is have somebody you trust that you can talk to around these sensitive issues. So, hey, I have to have this conversation at work. I'm thinking about starting it this way. So they might say, that's a little harsh. You know, someone you trust, or you know, or I wouldn't say it that way, or yeah, you know, I heard what you're saying, but you really missed the mark. You might want to add a little bit more of this or take out some of that. So again, ally, who can you hand the baton to? Ally, who is a trusted colleague inside or outside my organization that I can show up with? And the other one is optics. So I do a lot of trainings like this, and I won't bore you with adult learner theory, but going back to the example I gave you about an organization reaching out to me saying, Ken, come in and let's talk about race issues. And I'll come in. I kind of do a needs assessment of the organization. So this is a true story. I was asked to come into a local manufacturing firm, about 200 employees, and they were about 85% white, just to give you the optics. And they wanted me to talk about race post George Floyd. And I'm capable of leading the conversation, but I also understand for 85% of that organization, which by the way had no foundation to have crucial conversations, it would just be another Black guy on his soapbox. I brought a white male ally with me because optically, you know, we kind of co-led the discussion so that people just would say, okay, I can listen. So when you think about allyship, it shows up in a few ways. And for that question that came in about, you know, violence activities that have been placed upon Blacks, I hope that helped. And then I'm reading something else in the chat. So, you know, there's someone asked for advice about things people say or do that's insensitive. And that's why I think awareness goes a long way. And we do this. And so I gave you code switching. Another one, if you're not familiar with this term, you can look up, is microaggressions. And microaggressions, and I define them as these things that people may say or do that are not intended to be negative, but they still have a negative impact. And so again, by being aware, we can help mitigate some of these microaggressions. And that is probably one of the biggest impacts to company culture is microaggressions. People are just feel uncomfortable, like they're on eggshells all the time. Let me give you an example. I've been working in the business community for 30 years, and I've had people say to me, Ken, you're so articulate for a Black guy. Okay, so it's one of those things, not, they weren't trying to put me down, but it came off as a put down. And so I equate a microaggression to an emotional paper cut. And if any of you ever had a paper cut, it's not the end of the world, but you don't want another one. So imagine if people that are from a marginalized group, women, persons of color, LGBTQ plus, whatever, that while they're at work, if unknowingly their coworkers are giving them an emotional paper cut and they get 3 or 4 a day, and if you work Monday through Friday, you get that 5 days a week. When you go home over the weekend, are you able to unwind? When you wake up on Monday morning to come back, have you recovered from that? So it's very important for us to recognize those microaggressions and then have the conversation. Hey, are you aware there's another way to say this? Or when you say that, you're stereotyping a whole group of people. Appeal to a person's higher principles. Hey, you're a fair-minded person. You might not know that was kind of a negative statement that you said. And I'll give you some examples. And please don't take this out of context. I'm not trying to offend anyone. But I grew up where it was, we used to use the term, you juice someone down, which means you bartered or haggled or negotiated down. So I've gotten away from that. I didn't know I was committing a microaggression to people that were Jewish. And so now I say, you want to barter, you want to negotiate, you want to haggle. I don't use that phrase anymore. And so that's an example. So we can inadvertently do that sometimes, but we want to call it out in a respectful way when we do it, because you want to appeal to a person's higher principles. If you just call them out, you're dumb for not knowing this. Okay, they're defending the fact you called them dumb. But if you say, hey, there's another way to say this, and when you say it that way, it's not as offensive. So thank you for that question. And thank you for all the questions. I am doing my best to catch up. There's quite a few now. So. Yep. So this one went to everyone, the frustration about aiming far beyond what the organization is currently ready for. Yeah, that's the pace piece. And so if you don't have buy-in, or if you go too fast too soon, that can create, so it's very important that you move at a pace, but also you can celebrate quick wins. So let me offer you this as well. You'll never hear me minimize diversity, equity, inclusion into a potluck experience. But if that is the experience to bring people together, to be intentional about it. So, okay, and this is true. You can look it up. We're coming up on Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And if someone on your team happens to be a descendant from Asian Pacific Island heritage, then maybe you have a potluck or a themed lunch around that to talk about what else can we do to create greater awarenesses. And so you understand the pace. So if your organization has never done anything around diversity and inclusion, getting consensus and buy-in and celebrating quick wins might go further than, we're going to bring in this seminar on white privilege. I heard that term come up, and then a lot of people leave feeling uncomfortable. So that it might take time to overcome. So you just need to understand the pace of your organization. Yep, and yep, some great examples about how we talk about microaggressions.
So I don't want to take away from nobody's time. I'm sorry, Ken.
Oh, that's okay.
I don't want to take away from nobody's time, because I know we're wrapping up and we're going to be done at 2:30. So if anyone has any other questions, we can send them in. Ken, I know you're busy. I don't want to take your time up too. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm sure we all, hopefully I can speak for everyone in saying that we all have. And he won't get those slides and stuff out with his contact information. But Ken, I did want to, just in case you had something else, I don't want to hold you up. And I appreciate your time that you've given us. And just in case anybody else wanted to discuss anything else, and My other
Let me say this, Van.
co-facilitators.
Yeah,
Yes, go ahead.
Indulge me for 60 seconds and then I'll let you get back so you can wrap up your meeting.
Okay.
I am sincere. When you get my email address, shoot me an email. If I'm able to answer your question, I will. And to do this, and I'm a processor. You might be like me. Later on today, later this week, you'll be doing something. Oh, what did Ken say? Or I should ask Ken this. Shoot me an email. I'll do my best to answer that. So thank you for your time. It's been wonderful. I know enough to be dangerous about what AmeriCorps does, but it's good work. Keep doing what you do. And Vance, if you need anything else from me, let me know. And everybody, I'm saying this publicly. I agreed to do this because I like Vance, and he now owes me a cup of coffee. So
I got you. I got you. Thank you so much.
All right, take care, everybody.
Yes, you too. I'm sorry, y'all. I just want to make sure we had enough time and make sure, you know, I love the conversation. We getting good stuff going. I just don't want us to because, once stuff start going and it can be like, oh, okay, it's 2:45. We're supposed to be done at 2:30, So I just wanted to put that out there. Oh, he's gone already, but thank you, Ken. Talk to you later. Woo, appreciate you. Please drop your emails if you want any of this stuff sent to you, and we can do that. And team, I don't know if I'm missing anything. I didn't want to, I just want to make sure we got everything situated.
Thanks, Vance. I just want to add in, we have a couple more resources to share as well too, in terms of financial assistance services, a list of online resources, and then Operation Hope. This is stuff in terms of helping with your service education award, how to use that. And then also just I think the general list is goes through each county and has organizations in each county around Michigan that you can use to help, in any way that we talked about needing help, or if you didn't even realize that there was something that could help you additionally. So it's a really, really good, thorough list of a lot of organizations in Michigan. If you want to receive this slide set and then also the one from Ken, put your email in the chat. And we will send those out to you. And then thank you all for joining us. It was a really wonderful conversation. Thank you all so much for participating and really making it a really great discourse.
Thank you for hosting the this conversation, and thanks for having us, and great job, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
I'm trying to make sure I'm catching everybody emails before.
Great job.